Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Einstein. I am an attorney who focuses exclusively on blockchain and crypto. I have my own law practice, which is Crypto Law Partners, and I'm also happy to say I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Distributed Lab, the fine people who are putting together BlockchainUA. So I wish I could be with you in person. It would be great if I could be, but I am COVID locked down in Los Angeles, USA. So we'll see when and if I can ever escape and come back to see you all. Today I'm going to be speaking about the law of DAOs, and give me a moment and I will share my screen. And my fellow host, do me a favor, just confirm for me that you can see the screen, that presentation.
Yeah, yes, we see everything all right.
Okay, you can see that where it says the law of DAOs, the presentation, because it's just not showing on mine. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so if for some reason anyone can't see the presentation and they want a copy, they can email me and it's not a problem. Okay, so let's talk about DAOs. And I have to give you the usual disclaimer. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. So please don't take this as legal advice. We're just talking in a general conceptual level. Okay, so what is a DAO? Let's just start at the most basic level. A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. There's a few ideas to unpack here. The basic idea is a DAO is a structure for group cooperation and governance that's based on blockchain and based on smart contracts. A DAO is not really a cryptocurrency. It's not a single smart contract. It's not a small cluster of contracts. It usually implies a group of people or a group of entities / people that are using some reasonably complex structure on the blockchain to coordinate their actions and then act upon those actions. And so it's an interesting idea. Why would someone use a DAO? Why don't people just pick up the phone? Why don't they just use Telegram? Why don't they form sort of a traditional type of entity, a company, a GmbH, a limited, or whatever? Well, of course, part of the reason is that same reason people use blockchain and cryptocurrency. There's a lot of flexibility available. There's a lot of innovation available with DAOs that you don't necessarily have, or you have a lot of technology enablement with DAOs that you don't necessarily have with traditional modes of human organization or traditional business or association types or legal types. There's also another reason people like or are looking at organizing their activities as a DAO, which is like with several elements of blockchain and cryptocurrency, you don't necessarily know the identities of the people involved. You don't necessarily have to KYC them. You don't have to AML them. They may have legitimate privacy concerns. They may be in a country that doesn't allow them to do the kind of assembling or organization or association that they want to do, and maybe they should have those political rights. You can say that DAOs are potentially a mode of free speech or political expression. They're not just related to business. They're not just related to a blockchain-y kind of thing. So DAOs potentially, DAOs are under development right now. It's a cutting edge area of law and technology and blockchain, but they're quite hot. I say part of the reason they're hot is that they're paired in many people's minds with decentralized finance or DeFi, and DeFi of course is taking off right now. I congratulate anyone who was part of the Uniswap yesterday. I think you have newfound wealth, so that's good for you. Okay, so let me just go to the next slide here. So, is a DAO a company? Can a DAO be a company? Can a DAO be a form of economic organization? Well, there's two ways of looking at this. There's the conceptual theoretical, and then there's the legal reality of it. There's this very famous idea out there called the theory of the firm. And from just a theoretical point of view, you have to ask yourself, what's a company? How is a company different from an individual engaging in business, or just a group of people being in a room and engaging in business. Like, what makes a company a company? What makes a firm a firm? And that discussion, that intellectual inquiry, is called the theory of the firm. And one of the hypotheses, or one of the ideas associated with the theory of the firm, is you can look at a company, you can look at a firm, an economic enterprise, as being the nexus of many legal contracts, or sort of the aggregation of legal contracts. You know, those could be employment contracts, those could be leases, those could be intellectual property contracts, they could be insurance contracts. And there's contracts sort of on the inside between a company and its employees, perhaps. And there's contracts maybe on the outside, which is between a company and its vendors. But no matter what, there's contracts. And when you take them as a whole, rather than looking at the individual parts, you have a company, you have a firm. So is a DAO, you know, you can argue that, you know, our smart contracts in the regular sense of the word. And they might be. They might have legal effect, or they might be the next thing that contracts are going to evolve into. And maybe DAOs are just a little bit ahead of their time, but since they are a nexus of smart contracts and relationships, under this particular theory of the firm, you can argue that DAOs are companies, that they are firms. So this idea may reflect economic reality, or how economic reality is developing. But of course, the next question is, are DAOs legally companies? Are they legally enterprises? Are they legally firms? You know, are they recognized? And, you know, recognized by whom is the next question. And the general answer to this is no. Okay, there's no such thing yet as a legally recognized entity type called a DAO. You know, a DAO, you know, you can't choose between limited liability company, corporation, and DAO. There's no box to check. There's no paper to file. The reason is that once you get beyond the individual or small group level, to operate at scale under one of these entity types, you need a license, in essence, from the government. You need government permission. You need a charter. You can't just set it up yourself and go. Someone needs to give you permission. Now, getting permission is not necessarily hard, but it is a government permission kind of thing. Now, of course, the next question is, why do you care? You know, who is the government to tell me what to do? You know, why can't I just set up a DAO? And if the DAO lets me pay people, if the DAO lets me receive value and give value, and all of us work together, why do we care? Why do we want that government charter? Well, the problem is, or the challenge is, all of us individually, at least, live in the real world. We have bodies, we have property to a certain extent, we have people we care about, and we're subject to the rules, more or less, of the existing economic system. We're subject to regulation of the real world. We're subject to the idea that in the real world, some things are crimes, and if you are convicted of that crime, you can lose your freedom, your property, your time, and maybe your family. So even though DAOs and cryptocurrency and blockchain in general may be highly attack resistant, you know, just like Bitcoin is very attack resistant, the people who make up these, or who participate in these platforms, are not attack resistant. They can try to become attack resistant by going to jurisdictions where they can do more or less things. They can move their assets around. They can do this or that. But, you know, so long as you have a body, and people you love have bodies, you're not completely attack resistant. Well, traditional legal forms provide some really good benefits. Traditional legal forms, like let's just say a corporation. A corporation has what's called legal personhood, or it's legally recognized as a person. This means that company can enter into contracts, even though it doesn't actually literally exist. When the government grants a charter, it can enter into contracts. It can enter into a lease. It can have employment relationships. It can license intellectual property. It can get insurance. It has benefits that those contracts exist under law and are legally enforceable under law in a way that maybe smart contracts aren't right now. The other big benefit of certain or most types of legally recognized persons is they offer limited liability. So if I form a company and I fund that company with $10,000 and that company ends up owing $100,000 and goes bankrupt, 99 times out of 100, so long as I didn't do anything bad or fraudulent, I personally don't need to pay that $100,000. My maximum exposure is that $10,000. And when you get a lot of people working together and investing in a company, especially a company that they don't have control over, that limited personal liability, where they can only lose up to their invested amount, but no more, is very important. And DAOs, when you participate in a DAO, you do not have that limited personal liability. If you're part of a DAO and that DAO does something wrong or criminal, and you are participating in it in some way, you as an individual don't have the shield that's offered by the form of a corporation or a limited liability company. It's a thing. So, and I'm not anti-DAO, I'm doing a lot of work with DAOs, but the question is, how do you deal with this? How do you sort of thread this needle? You know, how do you take advantage of what the DAO has to offer, which is this great blockchain platform, this new way of people interacting, these new modes of business, you know, like Sushi Swap and Uni and the rest of this. How do you operate on that level? But assuming you have things you care about and people you care about and assets you care about and you're known, how do you manage that risk? How do you make it so that you can enter into contracts beyond those existing on blockchain, but rent an office if you want to rent an office, or buy equipment, or pay an employee? You know, a DAO can't pay an employee. A DAO maybe can pay a contractor, which is a different kind of relationship, but a DAO isn't a legal person, so a DAO can't have an employee. So, you know, how do we deal? Well, the general idea, and it's actually the bottom line of the slide, is for now at least, until DAOs are a recognized legal form, and until you can get limited liability and the ability to enter contracts, a lot of entities are forming sort of traditional legal representatives, legal persons that one way or another act under the control of the DAO or act on behalf of the DAO. So on one hand, you have the DAO, which is in a way kind of beyond law, even though the people who participate in it aren't beyond law. But on the other hand, that DAO somehow interacts with, has control over, has influence over some real life recognized form of legal entity. And if you can make that legal entity and have it act on behalf of the DAO or be under control of the DAO, that legal entity can enter into contracts on behalf of the DAO. If someone's going to want to sue the DAO and they can't sue the DAO, you have that legal entity available, and that legal entity can get insurance and offer limited liability for its participants if it's set up correctly. So what I'm seeing a lot of DAOs doing, and I'm participating in this myself, is setting up some sort of legal entity where some activities of the DAO, maybe the dangerous ones or the economic ones, or the ones where it sort of has to touch the real world, are pulled off the DAO, and only those aspects are stuck inside the legal entity. So what does that look like when you actually do it? Well, a very common example is setting up a nonprofit foundation, usually a Swiss foundation. And you can see this, you know, in the pre-DAO world with almost everything. You know, Ethereum, I think, you know, broke ground with this, but Algorand, you know, everyone has a Swiss foundation. And the idea is that the Swiss foundation doesn't control the blockchain network, or in this discussion, it doesn't control the DAO. But you can put the intellectual property rights related, such as they exist, under the control of the foundation. You know, Linux has this, for example. And you can have the foundation issue grants to developers and enter into relationships with those developers. And the foundation can potentially take out insurance that protects certain people. So foundations are, you know, in this very recent area of law, I would call them their traditional approach to many of the legal problems that DAOs can face. You know, how do you provide real world interaction? How do you protect yourself? How do you handle certain kinds of relationships? But the problem with foundations is that they're limited. They can't do everything. They're fundamentally nonprofit, of course, but the way, at least under Swiss law, that foundations are limited is when you set up the foundation's charter, when you establish it, you're basically giving it its starting mission statement, its charter, and that cannot be changed over time, right? Obviously, an issue there is that you may outgrow that charter. You may, you know, technology is moving fast, DAOs evolve. What if that piece of paper, or digitally filed piece of paper, works in 2020, but it doesn't work in 2030. What do you do? There's also the issue that the foundation doesn't necessarily represent the interests of all the participants in the DAO. It may really represent the founders of the DAO. It may represent its own interests if it has a good chunk of tokens. There's a separation between the interests of the DAO and those participating in the DAO and the economic and legal interests of the foundation. Now, to some extent, this is good because they have independent legal personality and one is not necessarily responsible for the other one. On the other hand, if you get a foundation that has a board of directors that doesn't care what the DAO members think, or works in opposition to those DAO members, or is just trying to get rich off the foundation without taking care of anyone else, that's a problem. Because it's very hard to get rid of these directors, and just like it's very hard to change the charter, or maybe even impossible to change the charter of a foundation. So the new ground that I've been breaking, and some other very good, if I say so myself, some ground that attorneys working in this area are breaking, some new innovations we've been coming up with, is not setting up a foundation, or at least not just setting up a foundation in Switzerland, but also setting up an association in Switzerland. An association is a group of people who come together for some common purpose that is not necessarily a business or economic. So you can have a student association, you can have a professional association, you can have a charitable association, but you can also have associations that provide economic benefit or governance. FIFA, the International Soccer Organization, is an association, of course, you can tell by the name, and it's an association that's formed in Switzerland. And FIFA, whether it's technically nonprofit or not, is quite profitable, at least to its members. Now, under general law in most countries, barring certain protections, members of an association may have reasons to be concerned about personal liability, have reasons to be concerned about governance of the association. And the law is unclear whether if you form, for example, an association in the United States, whether you're going to be protected from personal liability and whether you can really enter all kinds of contracts. You can generally enter the contracts, but the personal liability thing can be an issue, especially if you're a profit enterprise or an enterprise where people are getting economic benefits. Well, in Switzerland, it's very interesting. You can form an association and you can set things up so that the individual members of that association, i.e. the members of the DAO, can have limited personal liability if you do this right. And if you have a charitable purpose, for example, supporting a blockchain network, supporting the development of the software that's related to that network, supporting the expansion of that network, you can get a recognized nonprofit status assigned to your association by the Swiss authorities. There's obviously work involved there. You're not entitled to it, but you can make it happen. So this is a complex area. It's too much to go into, of course, in just 20 minutes, but I'm happy to discuss this with people. And again, I wish I was with you all.